So today what I want to talk about is how you can use Power Apps to develop forms for your organization that would work in different languages. And the idea here is that many companies today, it's a reality, are international in nature. It doesn't always work in having everything in one language, English or whatever it might be. So that is essentially the topic we're going to be covering today. A few words about myself. So my name is Haniel. I'm a four-time Microsoft MVP, working in the SharePoint space, Office 365. In the last few years, I've been focusing a lot on the Power Platform. So building lots of great Power Apps and Power Automates and all that fun stuff. I've written a book recently that I published around Agile Office 365. So if you're in the space and you're looking at rolling it out in your organization, and either you're new to Agile or you're new to Office 365 or both, definitely recommend you check it out. Also on the screen, you'll see a QR code. If you're going to be scanning it, share with me your name, your email. I promise I'm not going to reach out to you, but you will get my contact information in case you want to be in touch with me. Okay, that's it for the shameless plug here. So let's get going. And I'm actually going to turn off my video for now, just so we can focus on the presentation itself. All right, so let's talk about the needs first of all. So in many cases, what happens is we're going to have an organization. You work at a company. Let's say it's based somewhere in the US. So your management team is asking you to go ahead and start building some Power Apps that people are going to be using. Actually, I should probably share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
We can see it now. We can see the business need. Why multilingual?
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. So what I'll do at the end, I'll share my contact info again and a QR code. I apologize for that. All right. So you're at a company. Let's say you're based out of the US. You're asked to build some great forms. Everything's great. You start building them, and then what happens is a merger happens, an acquisition happens, something, and all of a sudden, guess what? Now you have a company or you have another office in Mexico. And over time, what happens is more purchases, more acquisitions, more changes happening. Next thing you know, you've got all these different forms that you have to manage across different territories. And this is where things can get a little bit complex. And so why do we need to think about an actual architecture to support forms in many languages? Well, first of all, you want to make things easy to manage your solution over time. So today, for example, your company may be called, I don't know, Coca-Cola. And next year they decide to just call it Pepsi for whatever reason. If you don't want to have to go through every single form and manually change it, because that would be very, very time consuming and very error prone. So having a way to kind of centralize your content is really important. The second one is reducing development. This is really important. So as I said, today you may be in one location or working in one country with one language, but over time, you're going to be doing this over and over for different languages. Ideally, you don't want to have to build replicas of the same form. It's going to take me more effort, and there's a much higher likelihood of your apps actually going out of sync, where they don't look the same and one version wasn't updated, so you get into a bit of a mess there. Promoting expandability. So if, let's say, today you have already 2 languages and then another language is being added, or another couple of languages need to be added, spending time again on replicating is something that you want to cut down on. So having a mechanism where you can just say, you know what, we want to add a new language, no problem. Let's just get the terminology and we're done. That would be ideal. Really important point here, separating the solution, the Power Apps, from the language. We often hear about the challenge where every time something has to change on a form, marketing or whoever owns the content communications, they now need to issue a ticket to IT to go and change the solution. It is time consuming, it causes a bit of frustration, a lot of back and forth. So wouldn't it be nice if you can just completely segregate the actual technical solution of the Power App from the language that is being used, all the terms and all the choice fields and all that. So ideally, you want to create a separation so that IT worries about the functionality, and then communications, marketing, or whoever, or the business, worry about the language. And then the last one is creating consistency. And I've seen this many times in companies where you get forms that are very similar, but because there's no consistency in terminology, all of a sudden the user experience suffers. As an example, you might have a form where people are asked to, do you want to delete this page or this form? And in one form, it's going to say there's going to be a yes button and a no button. And then in another form, it's going to be an OK and a cancel button. Not an ideal situation. It makes it more difficult to update the documentation. And again, from an adoption and learning curve, it is definitely slowing things down. So what is the proposed solution that I have for you, which will help you overcome all these challenges and give you something much better? It's based on, personally, I've used SharePoint because it's something I'm comfortable with, and it's something that I find a lot of organizations are using today. So there's essentially are two lists, but if you want, you can have more. One of them is what is called the string labels. Those are static labels that just appear on any one form. And then there's going to be a second list, which is going to have your selection options. So if you have a choice field, a drop down, a radio button, checkbox, any of those where you can have multiple choices, you want to be able to also provide the text for them somewhere that can easily be updated and managed in the different languages. And then what happens is you build a form, and rather than hard coding all the values in the form, you're actually reading that information from the SharePoint lists. Down the road, you decided that you need a new language. What you do is you create or let's say you need another form, and you would leverage the same lists, but you'd be able to control which one of the labels you actually want to get for the form. So the form on the left and the form on the right would not be replicas of each other. They would be completely different, but they would leverage the same terminology or wherever possible, or leverage the same list to drive the solution. And then over time, you're going to be adding another form and another form, and using the same mechanism, you're going to be drawing from these resources to get the language in there. So when you're looking at the separation of responsibility, the forms at the top are built by IT, the list in the bottom, the SharePoint list, or you might want to choose CDS, a SQL database, whatever it might be, that is going to be managed by the business. So they just have to update the labels. The forms will automatically get that data. So let's look at an example here. So if you look, for example, on the left-hand side, we've got a label called name, and then we have a drop-down that has the value rouge in it. Traditionally, if you were to just build a basic form without any considerations of multilingual support, the label, you simply have a parameter called, or property called text, and you would set it to num. And then for the drop-down colors, which is my control here, I would have items which could be rouge, vert, bleu, whatever I want. That is hard-coded. In the new approach that I'm going to be showing you shortly, we're going a different route. So rather than just saying the text is num, I'm saying go and find me in my SharePoint list in the string labels an item where the label is called LBL name, because that's the one that I'm working with right now, and provide me the value of that label in the language that I want. And the same thing is what I'm going to be doing for the color, where I'm saying rather than just hard coding the color choices, I'm saying go and fetch me the list of my colors, in this case, for the specific language that I'm working with. Okay, that's it for the presentation, for the slides. Let's move over and actually look at the solution. So I'm going to share my screen here. So here's an example of a very simple form, nothing crazy about it. It has a label, which is my welcome label. It has a choice list, which has my colors. And then right here at the top is my language as it is defined in Office 365. Now, typically a language is made up of two different components. The first part, 2 letters, is the language itself. So EN for English, FR for French, SP for Spanish, etc. Then there's a hyphen, and then there are two more letters, and that is the locale. So you can have EN-CA, which would be Canada. You can have EN-US, which would be United States. I don't care about the locale. I really only care about the language. To me, English is English. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. You may choose to implement it in a different way, but in my case, I just chose to look at the first two characters. And so what I've done here, you can see I have my English label, I have my, my English text. And just to show you a very quick example, I'm going to switch over and I'm going to change my language right now to French. And once you change the language, typically it can take up to about, let's say, 30 seconds or so until the Power App will actually recognize that, hey, my language has just changed. If I go and refresh it now, it will actually go and pull the latest data from for me from my different lists. So let's see if it has already done it. It's thinking, there you go. So now you can see my language is set to French. It pulled the French label and it's giving me a couple of French colors, okay? Let's look at the magic behind the scenes. So let's look at the labels first. So over here on my screen, you can see a SharePoint list that has 4 different values in it. The app, that's just the name of my Power App, and I can give it any name I want. So that's the name that I wanted to give it, PPWT. And so that's just a way for me to group my labels if I'm going to be using the same list for different apps, then I just want to have a way to group them together. Then I have my label, that is the internal name of the label that I'm going to be using, and I'm using that for reference, so I know which label I'm getting. The value that I'm going to be displaying on the screen, and this is, remember I told you the first 2 characters of the language I'm working in, that's what this is right here. So I have English and I have French. Now, right now, if I were to set it up in a different language that is not supported, in other words, I don't have the labels for it, so I'm going to go and change it to German. You can see there's no German in here. If I'm going to go and refresh, it's going to take it another few seconds. But what's going to happen is, for any label, you can define what you want the default to be. In this particular demo, I'm just putting question marks. What I would normally do, though, is I would put the actual name of the label so I know, okay, for German, I need LBL name or LBL welcome because that's the name of the label that I'm looking for, which I am missing. So it's probably still going to take a few seconds before it's going to display. There you go. So now it's pulling my data for German. Okay, so it's putting a couple of question marks because it couldn't find a match. And my choice list is empty because there's no German at all. So that's in the case of the labels here. Now, I'm going to go and add an item. That's my form name. My label is LBL welcome. I'm going to save it. And you actually notice if I refresh my page now, everything is in French because now I just recently changed it to French. It would take a little bit of time. It'll switch it back to English. But for this particular demo, you don't have to worry about the SharePoint menus. Just look at the actual list and you'll see that now I have German. So if I go back to my list and if I hit refresh, you can see right away I get my label in German. Pretty cool. I didn't have to change my app. The SharePoint list could be managed by my communications folks. No dependency on IT at this point. And all I had to do literally is just go and add my label. And if that label would be used in many different forms, then it will all propagate and show that updated value everywhere. Let's go back to so right now I don't have a choice list. I'm now going to look at the second list. So here, these are my choices. So again, I have the name of my app that I'm using. Next, I'm going to have the control, which is the name of my control. I have my color, which is the label that I'm displaying. And with every label, or sorry, with every choice field in a list or in a dropdown, there typically is a value that you can associate. So the label may be red, but the value behind that list item is going to be something else. And so in this particular case, I choose to put the RGB value. I could put anything I want. In many cases, I would be using this maybe to match between, for example, Dynamics and a Power App, and I can do that kind of mapping because Dynamics is in one language, but my Power App, I don't want to be multilingual. And so I can do my mapping of the actual internal value that is in Dynamics in an entity back to what it will be displaying on the screen, which is going to be a simple label. The column order, this is something I added where I want to control in which order my my items will appear on the screen. So right now, if I go back to, I'm going to switch back to English for a moment. Okay. And so you'll see right now the colors based on the order 1, 2, and 3. If I go back to my form, I'm going to reload it. And once it pops up, give it a second. No, it hasn't taken my English yet. Give it a couple of seconds. But what you'll see is that it's going to give the colors in the order that it shows in my list. Okay, let's come back to that in a second. So while it's waiting, I'm actually going to go ahead and change the order here. So I'm going to say blue, green, red. So I'm just going to change the order around here. So I'm going to go to quick edit. And for this particular design, again, I'm using SharePoint as the backend. If you want to use, if you're more comfortable using CDS because your business users or whoever is working on it prefers to work in Dynamics, you can definitely use the same approach. SQL, anything that allows you to manage your tabular data, you're fine using that. So I'm going to actually make this number 5, and I'm going to make this number 9, so it doesn't even have to be sequential. If you know that there might be some numbers in between, I'm going to hit quick, exit my quick edit. So now, based on the numbers, I would expect the colors to be blue, then red, and then green based on the order. So if I go back here, and let's wait for it to quickly load. Takes a couple of seconds. There we go. Oh, still hasn't loaded it. Okay, so I think what's happening here is I probably didn't use my order number for the choice field, but that's something that you can do in the sorting. So I apologize for that. I thought I had that in here. Now, if I wanted to add additional values, so in German, remember I just added language, so I have no German here. If I wanted to add German, again, same idea, just like I did with my labels. So let's add a few colors. And I will do the colors or the numbers don't matter. I'll just put 0, 1, 2. Very important, the label has to be correct, or not the label, the language that I'm using has to be correct. So again, I'm going to save it, exit here. And then when I go back to my form, I'm going to change it back to my German. And now what's going to happen is in a few seconds, once I reload the form, you will see a label that appears in German, and you will also see the list items that are going to be here also in German. So let's see if it has taken that yet. Should be coming through any moment. Okay, so you can see my new colors come through. So we just bought a company in Germany. They insist on having the language in German. You say, no problem, give me the labels and we're done. This is really cool, very, very easy to manage. Now, a question I often get is, this is all nice and dandy because I'm working in English and French and German. They're all using the Latin character set. They're all left to right. What happens if you go with a language that's right to left or another character set? And so my answer to that is no problem. So let me show you. I'm now going to go into my label list here. I'm going to add a new item. And the title will be WT again. Labels LBL welcome. The value will be in Hebrew. I'm going to say hello. And this is Hebrew. I'm going to save it. And just like that, I'm going to go to my quick list and I will add some colors in Hebrew. So I'm going to add that here. Okay. And put the order that I want. And once I'm done, I'm going to hit exit. So now I've got my new values. I will now go and change my language in my app to Hebrew. And it's going to take a few seconds again to go. Move back in here. Okay, so we're going to have to probably wait another few seconds. I don't know if there's any questions so far that you want to bring up while this is loading. Okay. Let's try this again. There you go. So you can see my language is now Hebrew. I now have a character set that is right to left. So the language works, the whole mechanism works. The only thing that you'd have to do here is just deal with your positioning of your controls. And this is actually something you can also build. I didn't talk about it in this particular demo, but if you know that you're going to be dealing with a situation where you may have to deal with left to right versus right to left language, just like I'm able to select the labels in different languages, I could also set up a mechanism to say, if it is a left to right character set versus right to left character set, the positions of the controls should be flipped over. So that is also something that that you can control as part of the this mechanism, but it does require a little bit more logic on the positioning, not the languages themselves. I know that we ran through this a little bit fast, so I'm actually going to open it up to questions now. So it's more than, I know it says around the world in 60 minutes, but I think we've traveled a little bit in light speed here. So I'm going to open it up right now to any questions.
Hey, Hannah, do you see your questions panel on the right-hand side?
Yep.
Okay. Would you like me to read them off, or do you want to go ahead and go?
So let's just see here. It's actually maybe read. Oh, here we go. Now I see them.
And you can expand it too with the little arrow in the corner.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I'm going to open it up right now. Let's see what I find. Okay, where am I making the changes? So what I'm doing is, just for the purpose of this demo and the speed, I'm actually going in, I'm just typing in, there's a command here in PowerShell that I'm doing it. But if I were a user, what I would actually do is I would go into my account in Office 365. And then you can see this is right now set to Hebrew. So let me change it back to English. So where is it? Yeah, let me change it back to English and partial because they changed the menus here. So just 1 second. So I'm going to make this English. There we go. So the reason that I did it in partial is because it's a little bit faster. It only takes a few minutes. If you do it in the menu, in the user interface, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But let's get back to that question in a few minutes. Can we have validation on data we are entering for the form? So yes, you can do validation. I'm not sure, Azar, what kind of validation you're talking about. But if you want to make sure, for example, that you're entering in a certain range or you're entering certain text, you can do validation, but that's not dependent on the language. If you want to do something, you could, but I'd probably have to get a bit more details on that question. So maybe if you want to type it back into the question window, I can try to answer that better. Is it picking up the characters by the keyboard setting? No, yeah, well, yes. So my keyboard, I have set it to English and Hebrew, and I'm just typing and I'm just switching my language as I'm going along. Next question was, is there any plans to more tightly integrate language labels into Power Apps ecosystem rather than using a SharePoint list? Good question. I'm actually in discussions with Microsoft to find out, because they have seen my demo and they want to talk to me about the approach. Solution to this is going to be, but traditionally, if you've ever worked in a development environment, there used to be something called resource files in an application, and that's where all the language would be defined, which is essentially the same as the SharePoint list, but it would be part of the solution. And then if somebody would get a product, let's say Windows or something else, they would then get the language pack, which is a resource file. They would install it, and then they can switch to language. What I'm doing here with the SharePoint list is essentially the same thing, except that rather than bundling it together, I'm saying let's keep it separate because there's different audiences who need to manage that content. I don't want it to be hard-coded. Are you able to show the connections in the Power App? So Aaron, let me show you what the solution is. I'm going to actually go behind the scene here. So the first thing I'm doing is when I think it's when I show the screen. No, it's when I load the app. Okay. So when I load the app, the first thing I'm doing is there is a connector in Power App called Office 365 Users. And I'm saying, get me the my profile. And in my profile, there is a property called preferred language. Get me that language, but actually, where it says right here, left, comma 2, I only wanted 2 left characters. If I were to take this out, just to show you quickly, then of course it's going to complain. Okay, I'm going to take this out. So now, if I rerun the same on start, you can see it's en-ca. So remember before I said that it's giving you the language and the locale. By returning the entire name, that's what I'm getting. And you can see right now, my labels are not working anymore. And the reason they're not working is because they don't know about a language called en-ca. So what I would have to do here is say, rather than my language being en, I would actually have to go in here and say en-ca. And now if I reload my form, it's misbehaving. Let me restart. There we go. It's picking up the welcome. Okay, so that's the first part in my solution. That's the on start or whenever. And then whenever I want a label, so I'm doing 2 things here. First of all, when I'm loading the form, I'm loading all my string labels from my SharePoint list into a collection called string labels, and I'm loading my choice field labels into another collection called collection choice labels. Then, when I want to display a specific label, I'm saying lookup in my collection for my labels, and I want to have a match where the title is equal to ppwt, that's the name of my app. The label is equal to the name of the label that I want to give it to, and the language is what I got over here. That's my language. Now, coalesce is a function in Power App that says if I get nothing back, if this returns null, then give me something else in return. And it keeps looking and looking and looking in its list of arguments until it finds the first value that is not null. So as I said before, I put 2 question marks for this demo. What I would normally do is put in here LBL welcome, so that if for whatever reason it cannot find my label, I know what I have to add. Because imagine this could be hundreds of labels or thousands of labels in my list. But if you just look at a Power App as a communications person, you wouldn't know the name of the label you're missing. So right now, if I go and I change this back to just en, which is what I had before, I'm going to save that. And now if I run my form again, let's give it a second here, restart. Okay, so what you can see now is rather than just giving question marks, it tells me LBL welcome. And if I put on my communications hat to say, oh, I see, this form needs a label for the welcome message, and in my SharePoint list, I have to call the label LBL welcome. That's all I need to know. And once I have that information, I put it into my SharePoint list and I'm good. I hope, Aaron, that answers the question around the connections. And then for the choice field, it's essentially the same thing. I'm just going to go in here. And now here what I do is I'm filtering. So it's not just looking up. A lookup does a single value. A filter, it filters by the entire list and returns a subset of the values. And here again, I'm filtering on ppwt being my form, my control being DRP color, and my language being whatever it is, English in this case. And I'm saying get me all the items and display the label value for those elements. Okay. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to fix my change that I made so it's not going to be broken. 1, 2. Okay. All right. Next thing is, you're welcome, Aaron. Okay. So the next question was by Indira. I'm actually new to SharePoint lists too. Is there a link or something you can give to start the lists, please? So I'd be happy to share some links. If you just even Google just SharePoint lists, there's a lot of information available by Microsoft that explains how to create a list and how to put data in it. What's really important is that you need to make sure that you have a site, a SharePoint site to put the lists into. Alan, you were asking, so this is around SharePoint. Do you have information around doing this in Power BI or other environments like mobile app or web apps? So I'm not quite sure what you mean by doing this in Power BI. The idea is that SharePoint is my data source. It's not what I'm using as the form itself. The form is Power App. The SharePoint list is my data source. This app that I'm displaying right now is a Power App is natively built to be either in a mobile phone or in a tablet format. You can embed a Power App in Microsoft Teams on a SharePoint site. You can have it in a SharePoint list. So if you're asking about building a Power App that is going to be mobile, then yes, Power Apps are inherently mobile, and this whole mechanism that I've presented to you does work in mobile apps as well. I'm not sure exactly when you're saying doing this in Power BI. I'm not 100% clear on that, Alan. So maybe you want to clarify your question. Azar, going back to your second questions, can we have validation like for color names are valid for that language? So this solution is not actually, so if I go back here where I was, this solution is not actually doing the translation. It is providing you a mechanism to enter the data in a certain language. There are tools today like Google Translate and other tools that allow you to do real-time translation, and you can actually do a query and get back the value. In this particular architecture that I'm presenting, the onus is on the people who are managing the SharePoint lists to ensure that the data is presented in the right language, that there's no errors. All right. And I think those were all the questions. So let's see if I can go back here and if it already changed my language over to go back to Aaron, your question about the language. So one caveat I find with Office 365 is that language can actually be set in more than one place. And what you will find sometimes is that one thing is set in one place and then another piece of your profile is set somewhere else. Part of it is going to be in English or in one language, another one is going to be in a different language. So let me go back here and see if I can. So you can see right now my SharePoint list is in English, yet my my configurations were still in Hebrew. So let's go to my profile. Okay, something's going on with Delve right now. I've never seen this before, but that's unrelated to the solution. This is just the Office 365 admin or account configuration. So I think it's maybe under personal information. Trying to see where it is. It's somewhere in here where they have a setting. Nope. Yeah, that's, I think right now there's, oh, actually it's right here. That's where it is. So when you go to, so to take you back, so I'm going to go backtrack for a couple steps here so I can show you. So you go to my, my account, and then you're going to go to the cogwheel, which is normally on the right hand side, but it's on the left hand side because Hebrew is a right to left language. And then in here, you're going to have, it's going to say language and region, I believe, in English. And I'm going to change this language to be English. So let's see here, English. So yeah, it doesn't matter which English I choose. I'm going to say save. There we go. So in my settings here, you'll see language and time zone. And that's where you can set your language through the user interface. All right, Al, so be very helpful. Oh, perfect. Yeah, feel free to connect with me. Let me go back to my presentation since we have a few minutes so you can get my contact info if there's any questions. So just a second. Okay, right here. So let me know if the QR code is too small for you to scan it, but otherwise you have all my contact info on the screen as well. And that's pretty much it for me.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Hannah, so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to host this webinar. For everybody else who is asking for the recording, I see a couple of people that asked, will the recording be sent? Yes, it will be sent tomorrow at noon. So look at that from your email. You guys should receive that from me. But if you guys have any questions in between them, please feel free to reach out to Hannah or myself. And like I said before, You can catch our free training webinars on our YouTube channel at Pragmatic Works and just click under the free training playlist if you guys are looking for any of the previous or past webinars. You can find them there. But you guys will receive this recording tomorrow at noon. But thank you again so much for joining. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, evening. Hamal, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks everybody for your time today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.